Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. Today's video is all about spring books. Books that I think are perfect for the season of spring. For me, there are several things that I tend to look for in books for spring. The first one is nature or the outdoors. Books that are set primarily outside. I think I gravitate more towards those in this season. Also books that are a bit more lighter in their themes and also just more hopeful. I think spring for me is a season of hope and looking forward. So books that elicit that kind of feel as well. So the first part of this video, I want to recommend to you some books that I have already read that I think are perfect for the season of spring. And then later in the video, I want to share some of the books that are on my to be read list. So without further ado, let's get into the books that I would recommend for spring. The first book I want to recommend is one that I've read very recently, and that is Frenchman's Creek by Daphne du Maurier. This is a pirate romance adventure story and I loved it. I loved it so much more than I was expecting to. The story follows Donna, who is quite bored with her life. I think she's about to reach 30 years old. She's married, she has kids, but she's just not happy. She has no adventure in her life. So sometimes she dresses up as a boy and tries to be a highwayman and steal things from rich people. And she just generally is a bit of a problem to the society that she's living in. One day she decides she just needs to get away and she just needs to get out all the energy and adventure and just all the stuff pent up inside of her. She needs to just go away and have fun. So she goes to one of her husband's houses that he owns in Cornwall. I think at the start of the book they're in London. In this area where she moves to, there is a problem with pirates. And in particular, one pirate who is a French man who is apparently stealing loads of stuff from the rich people. So on one of Donna's explorations of her local area, who does she come into contact with but the French pirate? From there, we read the most fun and romantic pirate adventure story I've ever read. The next book I want to recommend is one that I have not heard anyone really talk about, and that is The Other Countess by Eve Edwards. I literally don't think I've met a single person who has also read this book, which is why I kind of want to recommend it. This is a historical romance following Lady Eleanor Rodriguez, and her father is a failed alchemist. He is so determined to find gold or to make gold that he ends up dragging his daughter and himself into financial ruin. They end up in England. I really can't remember why. I was like 12 when I read this book, so I'm really trying to rack my brain about what happened. But they end up in England and Lady Eleanor ends up in court. And she comes into contact with William Lacey, who is the new Earl of Dorset. And he is in a slightly similar situation in that his father has passed away and he has inherited his father's title, but also the financial ruin that he has left the family in. And so this court season, he is really tasked with finding a rich wife. We know where this story's gonna go. And that's kind of the charm of it. It's a young adult historical romance, so it's more on the kind of wholesome, flirting, kind of heartwarming side, which I much prefer in romance in general. So if you're having Bridgerton withdrawal symptoms, definitely pick up this book. It's also set in 1582, which, is that Tudor times? I did a history degree. The next book that I want to recommend is Anne of Green Gables by L.M. Montgomery. I don't think I could recommend nature-filled books without recommending this one. Anne of Green Gables is such a heartwarming story about Anne Shirley, who is an orphan and the brother and sister that she goes to live with, who are older and unable to do the work that they really need to do on their farm. They're really disappointed because they wanted a boy who could do all of the hard labour, but they end up falling in love with Anne, just as the reader does as well. Anne sees the world through such a beautiful, pure lens with so much hope that it's hard not for it to be contagious. And you end up finishing this book filled with so much joy and so much hope about the world. She also just describes nature and the changing seasons and leaves and flowers and all of that in such a beautiful way. Along a very similar theme, I am going to recommend The Secret Garden by Frances Hodgson Burnett. And this was a childhood favourite. I read this a few times as a child. This is my childhood copy. It's very stained and a bit gross now. It's very similar to Anne of Green Gables in that it follows an orphaned girl called Mary, and she ends up going to live with her uncle in the Yorkshire Moors, I think. Yes, the Yorkshire Moors. And there at his house, she ends up finding that there are all of these secrets, including a secret garden and a magical boy who can speak to animals and things like that. So again, this is a book that really romanticizes nature and the world around us, which I absolutely love reading at this time of year. I also love in spring books that are nostalgic and just comforting, and I think this is definitely one of those books for me as well. Going slightly off the theme, I want to recommend Anna and the French Kiss by Stephanie Perkins. As I've said many times on this channel, I am not the biggest fan of contemporary romance books. I tend to find them a little bit too cringy and a little bit too unrealistic that they bug me, but this is one of the exceptions actually. Anna and the French Kiss is about a teenage girl called Anna, and she is being sent to boarding school. She's from America. Her parents are sending her to boarding school in Paris, and for some reason she's not excited about this. I mean, I would be very excited about this, but she is not excited about it. When she gets to this new school, there is of course the romantic interest, who happens to be an English speaking French boy or a French speaking English boy. I can't remember. His name is Etienne St. Clair, so I think he's French. If you want something that is happy, a bit cheesy and romantic, but easy to read, I would definitely recommend Anna and the French Kiss. And the final book I want to recommend is Howl's Moving Castle by Diana Wynne Jones. I feel like I'm going to recommend this in every video I ever do, but this is another story that is perfect for the setting and the world that it is set in, and it describes the environment in such a beautiful way. The story follows Sophie. She's the daughter of a hat maker. She doesn't have any big goals for her life until one day, out of nowhere, a witch curses her to become an old woman. She doesn't know why or what she's done to deserve this, but she knows that she needs to go and find a cure and find a way to break this curse. And so she travels off in search of this cure, but on the way there she ends up encountering Howl's Moving Castle. Howl being the wizard who everyone in her land knows as eating the hearts of young girls. She ends up going to his castle and pretending that she is his new cleaning lady. It's just such a beautiful story. The characters are so heartwarming, and yeah, it's so wholesome as well. Yeah, I love it. It's brilliant. I don't need to say anything else about it. So now I want to talk about the books that I really want to get to in spring this year. And the first one that I really want to read is Where the Crawdads Sing by Delia Owens. I've had this on my shelf for like 2 years now, and there's just been always something about it where I've never been in the mood for it. Even though I know it sounds like something I would enjoy, but then I pick it up and I'm just not in the mood. but it sounds to me like it's a book that is very much about nature and very much about the environment. Also the fact that it's being made into a movie that's coming out soon. I'm not gonna lie, that is a big push for me to finally read it. It sounds like a mashup of historical fiction, murder mystery, thriller / environmental story, which sounds very intriguing, and I'm very excited to read it at some point this spring. The other book on my list is Daughter of the Forest by Juliette Marillier. Again, this is because of the nature element to the story. I actually started reading this book. I got about 250 pages in. I think I got, yeah, almost halfway. And I was enjoying it, but I don't think I was really in the mood for it when I was reading it, and I was forcing myself through it. But I think I'm ready to try and read it again. It follows a young girl called Saoirse, and she is one of 8 siblings. I think she has 7 brothers. Their father ends up remarrying near the start of the book, and the woman that he remarries is not very nice. She's an enchantress of some kind, and Saoirse is pretty convinced that she has enchanted her father to fall in love with her. The enchantress works out that Saoirse is trying to unveil her plan, and so she ends up putting a curse on all of the brothers, and only Saoirse can now break this curse. However, the land that she is living in is always under threat of these raiders, and just as her brothers are put under this curse, the raiders come and take her. Basically, she's kidnapped. I think there's a forbidden love story in this as well, and it sounds great, and I was enjoying it. It was just very slow, but I think I'm in the mood for that kind of thing now. So that's another one I really want to read this spring. I also really want to read 100 Years of Solitude by Gabriel Garcia Marquez. And I don't know if this is a particularly spring feel book, but the cover, the cover makes me feel like it is, so I'm going to include it anyway. And I think this book is supposedly the book that kind of set the genre of magical realism in the first place. And so I'm really interested to read really interested to read the beginnings of that genre and the book that really inspired so many other books that I now really love. It's also apparently the book that inspired Encanto, so I'm just really intrigued to read it. Everything I've heard says that it's a very difficult read, and it follows basically a family over 100 years, and they have some kind of magical thing going on in their family. I've heard that it's confusing because a lot of the characters all have the same names, so it's quite hard to keep track of who's who and who's doing what. But I'm excited. I really want to try this one, so yeah, I'm hoping to get to it this spring. And the final one that I could think of with a spring kind of feel to it that I really want to read is Edenbrooke by Julianne Donaldson. I've seen a lot of people recommend this one as a really good historical romance book, and also that it's quite a wholesome, pure, clean kind of romance that really romanticizes the brushing of hands and the passing each other in corridors, and that's the kind of romance I want to read about. So I'm also really interested to pick that one up as well. So that's it. There are all the books that I would recommend for spring, and also some of the books that I really want to read this spring. I hope that you really enjoyed this video, and I would love to know what recommendations you have for books for spring. Please let me know in the comments down below. And also if you've read any of these books, particularly the ones that I haven't read yet, I would love to know your opinions. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you very soon in the next video.